So welcome to another incredible mastermind on leadership. It's a Growth Seekers Leadership Mastermind. We talk all things leadership. And when we talk about leadership, we talk about that interaction where influence happens, where we influence ourselves to take the actions that we need to take to have the lives that we want, and then to be able to influence others to take the actions that they need to take to have the lives that they want. And today we're going to discuss the idea of having from this is straight from the core performance model that I teach, the idea of a mastery orientation versus a performance orientation, or sometimes called the ego orientation. And when we talk about mastery, it's really interesting because you all may have mentioned I may have mentioned before that what I discovered about mastery is that it's not an outcome, it's actually a process. And it's also about a relationship as well, because with mastery, you also have a different relationship with uncertainty. Too, it's all about internal rewards. It's about what's happening on the inside, who you're becoming. It's about really about having that growth and learning mindset, and really not attaching your sense of worth to a particular outcome, which doesn't mean that you don't want to have things to happen. But what happens is that the mastery perspective, the things that do happen for you as a result of the internal work that you do along the way. In other words, we always talk about the pot at the end of the rainbow. Well, mastery orientation looks at the pot at the end of the rainbow as the target, not the goal, right? Because you could move that tire if you wanted to. You could move that. It could be, instead of the gold at the end of the rainbow, it could be the silver at the start of the rainbow, but it's still the target. As far as who you need to become in order to get there, is really the goal. And for mastery orientation, it's an incredible place to be, because it is an internal journey. Now, performance orientation, also called the ego orientation, is really about being in those lower energy levels, the catabolic energies. When you think about mastery orientation versus performance or ego orientation, we're talking about the difference between power and force, right? Mastery is power. Performance orientation is really more about force. In that performance orientation, you're comparing yourself to others. You're wanting to do things to be better than others. It's the stuff that if you hear those memes at the end justifies the means, that's all performance orientation, because it's all about the outcome, right? The outcome is the goal. And how you get there doesn't matter, or how many people get hurt doesn't matter. It's just as long as you get that goal. Because with a performance orientation, it really is about the ego. It's about having those external rewards, whether it's money, whether it's which is it's basically things that are tangible, right? Money, certain things, trips, or material stuff, right? Or it's psychological praise, other people praising you. It's all the external stuff. And one of the challenges that we have is that when we were born, we were given values that were very much about achievement and accumulation. Because our parents, really, I mean, our parents were phenomenal at survival. Survival and security. That's what they were looking for. Any immigrants, which our parents were. So from an early on, we were taught about that if you achieve enough, if you accumulate enough, you'll be enough. So and then if we get into sports, or if we get into any careers about chasing the ladder in the corporate world, it's all performance orientation perspective, right? So that's basically what we wanted to discuss. And I know that Mark, my fellow facilitator on there, he wanted me to set the table. So I wanted to start off with that, and seeing if Mark had something else that he wanted to add to the table before we just open up to the whole mastermind.
Yeah, well, first of all, Walter, you said that so well, so thank you so much. And Yeah, I think that performance orientation is what we're socially conditioned to do, right? Because that creates great consumers, right? If all your validation is coming externally and you can buy it, then it's just about career and it's just about keeping the whole economy going. So for certain people that want to see the economy running, that type of social conditioning and programming is definitely to their best interests. You know, if you want to collect more taxes, if you, you know, have more dedicated employees, that's definitely a great uh, mindset to instill. But if you want to create a happy life, I think this mastery mindset that you're referring to is much more appropriate because you can work your tail off your entire life in the performance world and still end up miserable and unhappy, right?
Yep.
But the second you start a mastery journey, your mind's happiness starts to build up, and fairly quickly, you know, you can maintain a good positive mental attitude about yourself and what you're doing in the world, wherever your external status is. So I could not agree more. And where I sort of, for those that I'm sure you've read this, is Simon Sinek's work on the infinite versus finite players in the game, and I see a lot of similarities. But I love the language you're using here, Walter. So I think we should stick to that mastery versus performance, because that is sort of the fundamentals here. So
So I had a question for the mastermind here. Where in your life have you noticed as you were growing up that you were encouraged to have a performance-based um, orientation to life? And I'll throw one out there as well. Just even the way we parent kids, right? You behave well, we reward you. You don't behave well, we punish you. And it's interesting because we think that that's the only way to parent. I watched a video where there was a dad and a grandpa, and a little kid was having a meltdown. And what they did was they just the little kid was down on the ground, just having a meltdown, and both the grandpa and the dad just sat there. I mean, just stood there, and with love in their eyes, and just watched the child have the meltdown until the child was finished, and then they left. And I always thought that was really, really interesting, right? Because how many times do we see in when parents when these kids are having meltdowns, their parents start having meltdowns, right? And how they deal with their kids in that moment, right? They feel embarrassed, they feel like people are going to think they're not good parents, what have you, and in doing so, they are just comparing themselves to everyone else and what everybody else must be thinking. And if you ever notice those interactions, those are really telling. And those are happening in public. Imagine what happens in private, right? So has anybody got any examples of them growing up where they were taught that it was all about the outcome? It was all about getting along by just getting along by getting along, get on with the ship, right? And Mark has the hand up there. Boy,
I'm trying to get some engagement here, buddy. But let's see. I think the first most obvious one would be everything to do with the education system in general, right? Like absolutely everything from beginning to end in the education system is measured based on performance-based thinking, right? And that even includes sport that is commonly introduced at school as well. But even after school, whatever, um, I, I never recall competing against my friends, right? Until I was put in environments that was encouraged to do so.
yeah. Anybody else have any experiences they were growing up as to the performance? And it's really it's interesting because it also happens not only in sports and what have you, even 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 sexuality when you're young, right? Like if you're still a virgin at 17, there must be something wrong with you, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that was going on, right? It's all about performance, right? And it's interesting, but you're Gallum.
Oh, actually, you brought in a couple of or you inspire a couple of ideas in my brain right now. But I'm going to go back to the first idea. So no one really set me down and told me this, but I think coming to United States, somehow my system felt I was coming for a better opportunity, and I'm supposed to pretty much become this better person. Education is going to be available for me. I was going to generate some sort of status. And no one that I can recall put that on my system or set me down and told me that. But I had the assumption, I guess, however I created it. And later on, as I continued to do my journey, I realized I needed to remove that thing that I put on myself. I removed it literally when I was doing this personal development. And it felt good because no one really that I can recall, but just something told me. So when I removed it, it felt good. And then I realized actually it's okay for me to borrow that idea because it helped me to actually be wanting to go forward and wanting to become a better person. So for me to realize that it helped me. So that's one example I have.
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah, it's really interesting too, because even when we're kids, a lot of the stuff that we learn is sometimes could be really subtle. Also, as young boys, I know that we lack that frontal reasoning, that frontal lobe for most of our teenage years, so we did a lot of boneheaded things, right? But we were, I mean, it was sports, it was school, it was relationships. It was always about that performance, right? It's like everybody wanted to date that handsome or that really good looking girl in school. It was it just it got very competitive. There was a lot of comparisons. I know when we were going to school, my mom, there was five kids at one point because when my mom was married to my stepdad, he had two kids. She would make our clothes. All five of us would go with the exact same clothes, and that was so embarrassing because nobody else did that. Oh, yeah, we got ridiculed. Right? It was kind of, but we didn't have a lot of money at one point, right? And that's a way that she knew how to sew, so she clothed us in exact same clothing. Right? It was kind of weird, but at the time, that's what we needed to do, and so it really, I think that the conditioning was really subtle. You're right as far as schooling is that we got graded based on rote memory. Right? It's not what it wasn't really quite often what we really truly understood. It's but what we could remember, so that we can get a certain grade, so we can get so a certain percentage, so they can give us that, right? So yeah, I know that's something that really was something that I really didn't like about school. Um, Mark, and then Wolfgang.
Wolfgang can go first. That's fine.
Wolfgang, the floor is
It's a,
yours, Wolfgang.
it's a very interesting question. The first thing what came to my mind was also school. What I actually relate to my experience, and then while Gigi was talking and I listened to, it went to a total different level that this is actually connected to not being connected. So when I recall school, I remember I was not connected. And when I listened to Chichi, what was there for me somehow she was in Africa and then she went to United States. So coming to the States was something like shiny. There is a shiny object and we all want shiny objects, but only because we are not connected to what we had before. So there is not better in the US and it's not better in Africa or worse in Africa or worse there. They're either not really connected. So I realized today we also had a childhood, I would say, which was not full of plenty of money. I remember I came to school and they had the Adidas sport shoes and I had normal sport shoes. So there was things I wanted to have and it was connected to status and money and shiny object. And today, when I think back, we had something at home what you couldn't buy. There was something which was not connected to money, but we did not connect to it consciously. I became aware later on what I valued about my childhood, about my parents, about everything we had. But I didn't got introduced to it. So I was not connected to that. Because of that, I was so eager for this shiny object. But the shiny object is not something what makes the people who have the shiny object so much more happy, because they are also not connected to that. So they are not connected to having the shiny object. Not to speak about that shiny objects might be a good reason for paying or buying myself out of parentship. But this is not the topic. I think either or what stands for is not being connected. And as soon I connect myself, I become so complete that it doesn't matter anymore about the shiny object or not shiny object, because this connection feels so complete and all the outside things, whatever it is, just becomes a thing I can use or don't use. And then it's a total different level of my choice rather than I'm needing it to compensate something. So thank you very much for the topic. And thank you, Chichi, for your example of coming from two, which really brought me to the point of becoming aware. It's neither or good or worse. Also, school is not a bad thing. School is just what it is because we don't come connected from home. That's the reason why school can do what school does. Otherwise, school would just be a realm of knowledge where we choose. And when we don't choose, we have a bad mark because this teacher is not satisfied with me. But I wouldn't be attached to the mark. The mark just shows my interest in the topic. I'm not interested in that, and that is okay. But for school and for disconnected parents, it's a drama because they identify this mark with who you are being and the possibilities for later. So there's a lot of fears connected to these marks, what gives these marks so much power. So somehow like that, there is so much more, just as an idea, what came to my mind. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Wolfgang. I completely agree. What really sticks out for me in is like what Gigi was describing, the contrasting experience. I had a very unusual childhood as well. And when you come from being totally integrated into nature, and then you're brought back into civilization, right?
Yep.
You're there, the contrast there, like when you're integrated into nature, it's a symbiotic relationship, right? You're just part of the environment, right? And you're thriving with it. Whereas when you're in an industrialized and or inside of civilization, it becomes this conflict and competition based mindset, which ironically, I think is sort of derived from Darwinian thinking of that nature itself is a conflict, right? and a competition, which to your point about education there, Wolfgang, like there's some advantage to, you know, the meritocracy model, right? To identify who has stronger skills in different areas, right? But I think that the underlining thing, which is why I really love Simon Sinek's work in talking about finite versus infinite players, right, is the infinite playing mindset, which what I would consider to be the mastery mindset that Walter is talking about here, right, is about creating a game that is perpetuates, that keeps on going, that is able to be self-sustaining and self-containing, and it's in effect a perpetual motion machine, right? Whereas the finite game has a clear beginning and a clear end, right? So you have, it's more of that ego-based driven. You're motivated to achieve the pot of gold, as you put it, Walter, at the end of the rainbow, right? It's not about the rainbow. It's not about the journey. It's not about the cyclical, keeping them, you know, the top spinning, you know, it's about reaching the gold, right? But then once you've played that game, the finite game, and you reach the pot of gold, you realize that it's just a carrot that doesn't actually bring you any fulfillment. And it doesn't matter what, you might have moments of a dopamine high or whatever, right? Like Walter, you brought up, the dating thing, right? That it's exciting at first, right? And then, but once you actually enter a relationship, if you have that finite thinking, right, and you actually engage in it over a long period of time, right, you realize it's not really about those dopamine hits anymore, right? To make a successful marriage, it's about a process that actually is able to sustain, right? And so, I think a marriage is a great example of a infinite game versus finite thinking, because if you were just focused on just the end reward, you'd be perpetually miserable, because you'd always be chasing some other carrot. And there's only, at some point, the routine of everything just becomes routine. Right? And there's no ego gratification in it, and then therefore it just explodes in your face. So it doesn't matter if it's a marriage or even a business, right? If you're like, I think that's what I also love about Simon's work is he talks about finite businesses versus infinite businesses. As an infinite business, your objective as the leader of the company is to just perpetually make the company better over time and keep it going, right? It's not people are socially conditioned to think it's about a competition with every other business, but that's just not accurate, because that's not even how the economy functions, right? Like it's not about accumulating more, it's about keeping the game going. If somebody were to play the infinite game and with a finite mindset and win, their business would end. There'd be no point. Like everybody'd have to go on UBI, universal basic income. We'd all just sit back and do nothing. And like, what would be the fun of that? Right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that finite thinking or ego-driven thinking, as you were putting it, Walter, leads to nothing but misery and unhappiness, because ultimately you can win and you can win the game, or win a battle, but do you really win the war?
Yeah, and I think your Gallum, do you got your hand up? Was there something you wanted to say?
Yes, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think we have to also understand the ego. The ego is about the past or the future. And what we really realize when it all comes down to it is that we live our life in moments in this now present moment. And quite often when we're in that performance kind of mindset, we create this over there, that somehow over there is where we're going to be happy, where we're going to be fulfilled. When we get there, when we get that gold, when we buy that car, when we get that person, we create an over there that really doesn't truly exist, right? So, but I know Gallum, I know that Wolfgang would like to hear what you have to say before he leaves, so I'll pass it over to you for right now.
Oh, thank you. So Wolfgang, when you were speaking, actually, you did spark an idea within me, which is you're right. If I knew what I knew now, right, that creative self within me, I would not stop any other location. I would have been right where I was because I can create that. And also this also support what Mark was saying, which is, there is one thing that Mark says in 30 Days Quest, which I love, the creative economy. And there is no competition with that. And also there was, I used to be good with for the shiny object, with which I am also right now, and I'm working on it. But because I have hang out with you guys for a while now, I realize actually what you are showing today or sharing today is about me, working on me, continuing to work on me. It's not about this topic. I mean, it's not about this tool or that tool, whatever. I have found my superpower, which is Neurographica. Use that tool and just create the world for me. That's it. It doesn't matter what other tools that come in my way. So that's what I want to share.
Awesome.
Can I just respond to that really briefly, Walter?
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I agree with you, Gigi, 100% related to the creative economy, that there is no competition in it. But that doesn't mean that people don't bring a competitive mindset into the creative economy. But I think that's when creativity actually dies, right? Or that level of creativity in that individual starts to decrease over time, right? Because you can't compete, you can't play an infinite game and win with finite thinking, right? Or you can't win at mastery when it's ego driven. And so I just see there's an inherent conflict between that. And so the greatest creators aren't competing, they're just letting their soul shine, and then everybody else sees that their soul shining, whether it's a Michelangelo, a Da Vinci, an artist of so many different types, music, entertainment, the best actors and actresses, they radiate that character out of them. And it's not, if it came from ego, it would just look fake, right? And it doesn't look fake because it's not coming from ego, it's coming from mastery, I think.
Wolfgang, I know you got to go. So what's on your thoughts?
Yeah, the competitive mindset. As you know, I have some kids. I have some girls and some boys. So I could observe how different they are in terms of what they are naturally interested in. I would say we did not put bulldozers and tractors into boys' spaces unless they were going for it. Nor was it something I would not have given to my daughters, but they were interested in other things. So there is a natural difference by boys and girls being babies and little children. And I think then very significant comes into space, the place where adults watch that. And then comes the competitive mindset from the adults projected on this child just being what it is, and then suddenly it's okay to be like that or not be okay with it like that. And then I feel judged, and by not being that naturally to the T, suddenly I have a deficit in my expression, and then I need to express these, boys with their tractors and bulldozers and superheroes. They're so into powerful role models. And then suddenly this stays open. And then I think that becomes part of the being to complete something over life. And then it's like over competitive and over something. But I think it's really key that parents in the stage of 2 or even 1 to 5 years are able to leave that being okay, what the child is, so they become really complete with their experience of growing up. And because of not having, I say in average, this is not the case. In average, it's not okay to be loud and powerful and everything what is connected to it, or to be the opposite, to be weak. You need to be more strong. You have to stand on your feet when you're 4 years old. I mean, there is a lot of things which are projected on this child. So, and then this new mindset just is created, and then school comes and completes the journey on this human being. So that came up to me when I think naturally there is a difference in behavior between boys and girls. And because of not having the place of being that, it becomes more extreme in competitiveness, which the opposite, I think, is just being powerful and open. And when it's not powerful and open, it becomes competitive and want to destroy the others. I think that's not a natural state. The natural state of competition is just finding out who is better in something, and not like, I want to be so good that you have no space here. So somehow like that came to my mind.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, well, thank you, Wolfgang. I'm really enjoying this. Thank you guys for sharing all your perspectives. I'd really love to hear from you, Ray, too, on what your thoughts. And Yanni, I don't know if you want to contribute, but I just wanted to add also that I think that you just tapped into a really important aspect of leadership, Wolfgang, which is the relationship that you have to your authority figure. Right? Whether that, and for us as it taking on a leadership role, it's the relationship that we're having with the people that we're intending to inspire. Right? So if the individual, like let's just use the father, mother, child relationship. If the child admires the mother and father and wants their approval and is seeking their approval, they're going to stretch and grow. And if the parent encourages them to compete, right, then that person may have a really strong drive to want to compete because they want to please the person that they love, right, and that they admire. In a reverse context, if you have a catabolic relationship with your parental figure, right, and they encourage you to compete, it might have the exact opposite effect, right? Like you may say, forget competing, right? What's the point of this? This is absolutely ludicrous, right? So I think that relationship with competition or that relationship with ego and mindset or mastery rather is formed in part based on the relationship that somebody has with the person they're looking up to. Do they even want to compete?
Ray, what's on your mind? You're on mute again. I can hear you down the hall, but I can't
No,
hear.
I just been listening in, and actually it's interesting because as a young child, I had my mom and my grandparents raise me, but that was sort of a really loving relationship where my grandparents were always, what would you like to be? What would you, you know, but then there was a real spiritual component that was strong in their lives. So we always went to church, and we had a lot of love and different things, more like just sort of letting us open up and be ourselves. But then in my teenage years, my mom got divorced from my dad, and then we ended up with a blended family of boys, and and so there was my mom's new husband and then his boys, and he was very strict. So I hadn't really learned that until that time. It was sort of, we had to do this, or there was either the reward system, or if you were bad, there was punishment. And so it was a totally different, you know, my teenage years, I didn't really enjoy the way I did as a kid, just being allowed to dream and become, right? So I just sort of made me realize that having that spiritual, loving environment where what would you like to be was so much nicer than all the structured stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think to add to not to add, but to take this somewhere else too, is that when we're leading and we have these goals that we're endeavoring to influence ourselves to go after, or endeavoring to influence others to want to join us on that quest. I think even the way you look at those goals, I know quite often people will look at goals, and I know even Ray explained to me how many of this internet marketing things you'd have to sell in order for us to be debt free and all this, right? Um and which is okay. I mean, I love my wife, and I love when she gets excited, right? But I think the bigger questions I
Who
always,
doesn't like that, Walter? Who doesn't like that?
I had them all figured out, yeah.
but I think that what's really open, what's a really a bigger question is, who would you have to become in order to achieve that? And is that the person you want to become? And I think that for me, and finding my ikigai in what I do, it's because I like the person I am in what I do. Like I don't I get the opportunity with a lot of teenagers missing their frontal lobes, who sometimes will sleep in through our our sessions, or they'll tell me about how they lost it and how they got all angry and got kicked out, and I'm able to just give them grace, remind them that they're on the journey, and that they're 15 or 14, and this is where these messes are supposed to happen, right? And I like being that for them, because it's my equivalent of dancing at the bear. Because they would expect when something happens, and it's not even just my young ones, even my older ones, who decide an hour before a session that they want to push it for the second time to the next week. I have a term: life happens, we'll see you next week. That's it. And I get to practice not taking anything personal. I get to practice just being compassionate, being able to manage my emotions. The inner critic has no place. The inner critic has no place in my life. He can't beat me up, because you know what? Life's just happening. And there's a real flow. I've always been looking for flow. And what I found is that I've even noticed, and I'll share this with Mark, as Mark will get a kick out of this. I had an intro meeting with a 13-year-old and his dad, and they both live in Vegas. And I got this email not from his dad, but from the 13-year-old, Mr. Aguilar. I noticed that on your website, you do a 30 or 60-minute coaching call. Which one should I book for? So I just kind of said, yeah, you could book an hour and bring your dad on, right? And then at 13 years old, I found out that these videos that me and Mark made back in 2016, Unlocking Your Hockey Potential, this kid had actually bought that, probably with his own money, right? A while back, and he watches these videos all the time. And he started asking me questions about the videos. Because Mr. Aguilar, when you say about being in the present moment, why is that important, right? And I'm just like, what? This is a 13-year-old, right? A 13-year-old, and
Victory.
and you know what? I don't even sell that anymore. I don't even. I took that off my website. But what's
Why?
interesting,
Sorry, sorry, it's okay. I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, but I just thought about it, and what's really interesting is that when me and Mark put those together in 2016, who would have thought that a 13-year-old from Vegas who's obsessed of being a goaltender he watches these videos every week, the same video over and over again. And dad, I actually thought that some of the stuff is a bit over the head for 13-year-olds, right? And I'm finding that this kid actually knows material, right?
We've created a monster.
Yeah, and this kid is obsessed with being an elite level goaltender. And I found out that his dad is also very creative. He was Dustin Wolf's parents found him juggling, like the Tom Cruise and whatever that movie was where he's juggling all.
Cocktail or whatever, right?
But here's the interesting part. That's where Michelle Wolf remembers him. He's now touring the US with a group called Savannah Bananas, and he's the coach of they got the Savannah Bananas team, and then they got the I think the Party Animals, and he's the coach. So he comes out at certain times and starts doing this juggling, and then actually will go into the stands and does it there as well too. And he's actually, and when I was talking to him about what I was doing, he goes, I'm gonna have to peek on his stuff too, because this sounds like something I could use too, right? And it's just really fascinating. But what I really loved about that experience is that growth mindset. Like dad's just saying, and I just said, I usually do this ELI assessment so that we could find out if he just said, no, my kid's all bought in. He's bought in. He watches your videos all the time. He goes, he's just bought in. He wants to go at 13. Right. And he doesn't want to do any other sports. That's it. He's landed on, he's going to be a goaltender. That's who he is. Teach me what I need to know. And when I said, what did Michelle Wolf say to you? Right. And she goes, he never could have been the goaltender he was without Walt. He goes, he was a game changer in his life.
Cheers, buddy. Cheers.
Yeah,
that's victory right there, buddy. That's victory.
And it's funny. I'm just like, oh, okay. And I think that I also had to, but what's really interesting is that I really pointed out to him, and it really resonated with the dad. And I said, I want to have you full disclosure. I don't know if your kid's going to be another Dustin Wolf and make it to the NHL, but we're going to equip him with tools and insights to become the best person of himself. And he could be a great dad, a great student, a great employee. Just and his dad said, me and his mom are on the same page. It's the becoming, right? The target will change based on his actual talent and whether or not he has the growth spurt, right? Because there's a lot of things that need to happen, right? But I think that when we talk about and I asked him as well too, I said, why hockey? Why not football? You're down in the US, there's football, there's basketball, there's soccer, there's a lot of other sports. He goes, because it's fast and I love fast. And he was just like so passionate about it, right? At 13. And I think that as a leader as well, too, is that why are the goals that we're doing? Can we get that 13-year-old passionate about what we're doing? Right? It's because if like I was getting pumped up by this kid, like asking me questions about a videos that I did like, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. I don't know. It's like,
Well,
and,
they're still relevant, man. That was some
Yeah.
timeless wisdom in those videos.
yeah, and it's interesting, and I'm actually also understanding too is that that I think those videos were a bit ahead of the time.
A
And
little.
I know now it's relevant, and now there's just so much out there about meditation, mindfulness, how it all it all connects and what have you. But I think what's really important is that I think that when we are looking to have a mastery mindset, right, is understand that this whole game is an illusion, right? It's all was created by humans to be able to the rules were created by humans for humans, right? About humans. But when you get a mastery orientation, you realize that it's really all just an illusion, but yet it's real. And if we could learn to play the game from the infinite game, like Mark was talking about, instead of the finite game, we realize that if the targets can change, you can go from one product to another product to whatever you want, but who you're becoming is the goal. Are you, if what you're doing is not bringing you joy, it's not getting you pumped up, and if it's not allowing you to grow to be the person that you've always wanted to be able to feel the feelings that you most likely would like to feel, then why are you doing it? Like it's a like I don't know. I was just thinking about that the other day. Like, why do I still do what I do? Right? Like, I needed the summer to go and just have some fun because I've been doing this for a while, and I just found that this particular kid just pumped me up again. Right? I just found out one of my young guys, 15 years old, going to his first WHL camp, had an amazing start at 15. I found out that one of my 16-year-olds just had his first fight with a 19-year-old. Like these are all first for these guys, right? And we're like this is the stuff, and it's interesting because part of me inside is I'm going, yeah, and then the other part is, yeah, okay, well, what's your dad think about that? He goes, well, I probably wasn't wise to get into a fight in a mean nothing tryout, right? Because he's already got, right? So okay, so but inside I'm just thinking, wow, that's how cool is that, right? It's like I'm like that little 16-year-old remembering my first fight, right, and all that kind of stuff, right? And it's just um, this excites me. I get excited. Yesterday when I came, I was with one of my longest clients, and he was having to deal with having to make another serious decision about whether to do something or not. And it could mean it could cost him a lot of money. And I didn't tell him what to do. I just reminded him of holographic thinking. And Rayanne, when I came in the door, how did I look? Remember when I was what I said? What did I say? I was all excited, wasn't I? Yeah, I was excited. I was going, man, I'm doing what I love to do, and I get paid for this. That's kind of crazy, right? So, I think that when you're looking to lead people, are you leading them in a direction of something that you're genuinely passionate and excited about, or are you just leading them to a means to an ends?
I wanna jump in there for a second there, Walt, because what Ray you were talking about with the marketing thing, right? And one of the things I've observed in masterminding with everybody for the last 6, 7, 8 years. I mean, so we started masterminding first, really, was or is rather that everybody's got different motivations based on their personality type. And there's, you can categorize it probably into at least 9. I mean, if you use Myers-Briggs, it's 16, and truth be told, that goes up to like 512 or something like that when you start, looking at all the deep dives of each different idiosyncrasy of all the personalities. But you can sort of group them into sort of 3 main groups. And the answer to the question for you, Walter, is going to be different from me, is going to be different from Gigi, and it's going to be different from Rayanne to that question, because what we want is slightly different based, like the outcome that we want is slightly different based on personality. And what I've noticed is that when you create a synchronicity, because it's not that one of person, right, is right or wrong, right? It's just, it's complementary. It creates a balance, a symbiosis, and it creates a healthy balance. So to have, and this is, I guess what I'm trying to say is, by having solely a mastery mindset without acknowledging the benefits of competition, right? Because this I think would be all academic speculation, right? Not recognizing that it's 2 sides of the same coin, right? And I guess the example that I'd like to use is, it's, if you could speculate and talk about growing a garden, say in your backyard, all day long, right? And you could talk all about the different, heirloom seeds and everything else, right? But if you never plant a seed in the garden and you never do the actual work itself, right, which is a competition, competitive based action, right? Meaning you're competing against nature, you're doing all of this stuff to try to create this, vegetable in your garden. You would never test yourself as to whether your speculation was accurate, right? So there's a bit of a BS factor in just focusing on mastery without applying it, right? And I don't think it's, I think we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the value of the competition itself, because it puts us to the test, much like you got the rush seeing this young man come to you, or one of your clients, and whatever, having his first fight, and you recalling on that, because that's pure competition, right? That's a competitive based mindset. There's nothing more competitive than just a brawl, right? But so I think there's value in both, and acknowledging that is I just wanted to pause to acknowledge that, because like this young 13-year-old that you're talking about, that got all pumped up about these videos, right? He's clearly a much smarter kid than we were at 13, because he was, we went down the rabbit hole with that one. That was made for, at least young adults, right? If not adults. So for him to be at that level already, and still desire to want to compete at a high level like this, shows a really good understanding of that balance, right? And that's why he's going to end up in the NHL, because he has the desire to compete and he has the mastery mindset. And I think that's what I'm trying to say here is that from a leadership perspective, I don't think we should be sitting here and saying that mastery alone is enough, right? Because it is a competition, and you do get joy and satisfaction from winning. I think where the problem is, in from my perspective at least, and as it relates to what I know Ray's desire, is you want both mastery and results, right? And I think for me personally, that's what I focused on, more mastery, avoiding competition for my own personal history and background, and seeing competition as a negative and actually revolting against it for much of the same reasons Wolfgang was talking about earlier, relationships with parents.
Yep.
But and Ray, you were describing the same thing with your grandmother and your situation at home as well. So this negative relationship with competition and this sole focus on mastery doesn't really serve you don't end up being like that young man, because he's got wise parents, right, who see his potential. They want his potential to come out. They're encouraging him to develop the mastery, but they're also encouraging him to compete, not to compete to win, but to compete to fulfill his heart's desire, which is, I think, winning in life.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, Mark, that's really important is to understand needs and wants. Because needs are things that you do that you can do with a minimal level of satisfaction. Wants are things you could live without, but you prefer not to. And I think that whenever you're endeavoring to go after a goal, there are going to be things that you need to do. Like with what I do with what I do with my players is that we set up a success formula. And they need to write down their rituals and their routines, right? They also need to have a game day success formula, right? And what happens is that where the magic happens is when those needs start becoming the wants, right? Because there's a shift of energy when that happens, right? Because we always say people will just do what they want to do in the end. That's really what it comes down to. And because to constantly live from a point of need, things can really become obligations. And obligations really, you get a certain level of satisfaction in life living out your obligations, but it's when you start doing the things that you want to do where the magic happens, right? That's where the creativity happens. That's where the intuition happens. That's where the magic happens, right? So I think that one of the things I've noticed is that being able to help people change what they feel they need to do to what they want to do. And that's where connecting them with who are they going to become along the journey, right? Right? Because really most of us want, the reason why we do the things in our lives that we want to is because there's a payoff for us, right? We get more pleasure, more joy, more satisfaction, right? But we have lives that require a lot of needs, right? That we things that if we don't do those needs, we may face a negative outcome. I don't think anybody's ever talked to somebody as, hey, did you want to come over today? No, I need to go to work tomorrow. Nobody's ever said, hey, I'd love to, but hey, I want to go to work tomorrow and I want to do my best there, so I can't come tonight, right? It's always the need, right? Because there's a certain level of a minimal level of satisfaction needed in order to do that. And that's why you have a lot of people that go to work, but they lack the passion. That's why 70% of the workforce in the Canadian workforce are not fully engaged in an 8-hour period, because they're going to work because they need to go to work, right? When people do, and I guess as a leadership, how to inspire people to turn the needs that are required for whatever you're leading them to into a want to and a get to, right? Because that's when you start getting, you go from motivation to inspiration. Motivation is getting people to do something. inspiration is getting them to want to do that something. And
But can you really actually get somebody to want to do something that you want them to do? Or is it you helping them find out what they really want to do and make that connection and create that win-win relationship from that point? Because
it's
I
it's a
don't
matter of
think I've ever
influence.
seen it the other way around. I can't imagine, I can't think of a kid like this young man, for example, right? He himself wants to play the hockey, right? Or whatever it is, you know, like the person wants to do whatever it is they want to do, but that comes from inside. That's not an outside thing, in my experience, at least, unless you think I'm wrong.
No, I think you're right. That's why we can't control, and we can't control, we can't force someone to do something they don't want to do. And that's why the platinum rule is so effective, right? What we think other people want and need may not be what they want to need. Right. So that's why it's so important to understand what the person feels they need, what the person wants, and then learning to influence them. Right.
Because you can make an alignment between your wants and needs and the other person's wants and needs if you understand. And then, like, if you were going to coach a company or, you know, an executive team, it'd be find out what everybody's wants and needs are and help them fulfill it through doing the activity you want them to do. Right. But right now we sort of traditionally have this mindset where that's your business, that's your problem, just come here, do the job for 8 hours, and that's that.
Yeah. And that's it, because because a lot of our 9 to 5 is very transactional.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's transactional. I'll go there. I'll give you those hours. You'll pay me a paycheck every 2 weeks. That's it. That's right.
And it's not only just that, Walt. If you think about it, it's all of society is transactional.
Yeah.
Right? Like like huge aspects of all forms of relationships people have been socially conditioned to make them transactional. And it's when they're not transactional that's when they stand out as being unique.
And I think that's why the connection is so huge, right? Because if you can connect to the people you're endeavoring to lead, right, then you have the ability to have the influence on them. My biggest superpower is my ability to connect to people. If I can't connect to you, it doesn't matter what I know. Because number one, you won't be showing up. You won't be engaged. Number two, if you're showing up, you're not going to be fully there. So if you're going to lead someone, you first of all have to be connected to yourself, right? Connected to God. And then once you do that, it's going to be a lot easier to put the self to the side and really connect to what somebody really wants and needs, right? And when you know what their wants are and what their needs are, then the journey of influencing comes. I tell my guys, you know what? I'm going to teach you a lot of different insights, a lot of tools. We're going to do that. But that's just knowledge. I'm not taking responsibility for your journey. That has to be yours. Right?
You know, what just came up for me, Walt, is like that saying that you've said to me for years now, which is in an argument or in a conflict, right, with somebody else, right, with another individual or group, you have to choose between being right, and connection. And I think it's just important to repeat this here, because what you're really saying in the bigger point is the larger aperture of that point, which is if you sacrifice being right, or you sacrifice connection for being right, right, then you lose all influence and you lose anyway. So it doesn't matter that you're right.
Correct. And when you stay connected, you can play the infinite game.
Yeah, I get it.
And and I think
That's
that's
some deep social conditioning right there, I gotta tell you. That's some conflict, competition stuff that I'm sure anybody that's got any sort of conflict in their background, right? They're gonna see that if you can, because the thing that I just with the advantage of hindsight is that's a two-stage aperture lens to really for it to sink in. Right? Because you need number one to understand like it's one thing to be right, and then have the connection, but then the wider influence as well.
awesome. Well, we've gone 17 minutes over, and I think we went deep on this one. Does anybody else have anything to say? But whatever music your Gallum's grooving to, it sounds like it's good music. Your
It
groove
was from inside. There
from
was no
inside.
other music actually.
Oh, it was, but it's just from inside, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that in the end, what it comes down to is when you look at a mastery or a performance orientation, ego orientation, it really comes down to the way that we are connected to ourselves, connected to our dreams, and really understanding whether they're needs or wants. And then really when you are looking to influence other people, um, being able to connect to them and then understand what their wants and needs are, and then being able to influence them by really helping them to shift some of those needs into wants, because in the end people do what they want to do anyways. And it's just it's like I've had a couple of times where I've had to like reimburse people their money because we decided that strength conditioning is more important for my son. Okay, where do you want me to send your money back to? Like I don't worry about it, because if that's what they want to do, what am I going to do? Force them, right? What am I keep somebody's money because we had a con? No, I don't know. It's just in the end, you will lead people that are like yourself, and if you can have a mastery mindset to what you do, then you'll find it'll be a lot easier to connect with them and a lot easier to influence them. And in the end, you'll have the feelings that you want to have, and they'll have the feelings that they want to have. And perhaps, I mean, me and Mark, we've been friends for 30 years plus, whatever, right? And the targets have always changed, right? There's always something going on and this and that. And okay, you're excited about it. Okay, yeah, here's my visa, whatever, right? Just to me, that's not the most important part, right? It's the connection we've had, and I think that I think that when we start to learn that this whole idea of the game, right? It's all an illusion, right? It's all an illusion, and but on the other hand, it's very real, and money's real, and we need to have resources so that we can really be of service to others, right? Because without resources, then we're in survival mode. And if we're in survival mode, then we're self-focused because we have to. I'd sure love to help that other person that's drowning, but I got to learn how to swim first, so that I don't drown. Right? So, and once we get so well that then we have a boat, then we could take a rowboat over there and save one other person. And if we get even better, then we got a bigger boat, or we got an ocean liner, and we could save a whole other ship that goes down, right? So
Exactly. And I think that's the thing I'd like to leave. And I love this idea of mastery. And I think there's times when the finite game is appropriate, and there's times when the infinite game is appropriate, right? And the finite game, that competition game, really allows you to hone and apply your skill and really test it to see, is it something I can do? Can I grow this, cucumber in the garden, right? Or is this just academic speculation, right? Or Or, you know, sometimes other games, it's completely inappropriate to be playing the finite game. Like, for example, in partnership, right? You want to make sure everybody on the team is winning, which is an infinite game.
I'd like to leave everybody with a story, which is really interesting. My young goaltender that's at the Wenatchee Wild Junior A camp. He said he discovered something about himself, and he said what he did was that what he did was when he got scored on, usually you see goalies tapping the nets and skating around and going for a skate and what have you. He goes, what I decided to do was just to put my hands up, stand straight, and just breathe and just be still. And he said that what he realized is that every time he kind of went out and started moving and doing all that, that actually just kind of got his nerves up. So he realized that if he just kind of focused on his breath and just stood there, he said he found that he was able to shake off that last goal, and he played incredible because he was just 95% outer focus, only 5% inner focus. So yeah, so he discovered that on his own. And what's really fascinating is that whenever you're leading people and they finally tap into what it's all about, right? Which is really finding that greatest and highest best version of yourself. And everybody's is a little bit different. That's where magic really happens, right? Because he goes, yeah, and he goes, you know what I was thinking about? I go, no. I go, tell me, Jason. He goes, well, you told me that if I really thought about it, I am the most prepared ever in my life to take advantage of this opportunity. And he goes, you know what I thought about it? And he goes, you were right. So I didn't have to go get all jittery. I just stood there realizing I'm prepared for this opportunity. And he goes, I was having guys that were 19, 20-year-olds come and shooting on him. He's only 15. But he goes, man, he goes, I was so confident. Because he just became the game. He just realized that, yeah, he just finally got it. Right. At any think about this, even if we've thought about this as adults ourselves, no matter what adversity we're going through presently, we're the most prepared ever to be able to take on that adversity. Think about that, right? Whatever it is, whatever it may be, we're the best, whether it's leading people, whether it's starting a business, whether it's working your business, whatever, whether it's a health issue, whether it's whether it's a relationship issue, we're the most prepared we've ever been. So there's no need to have any self-conscious or inner critic, or whatever, because yeah. And he discovered that at 15.
That's why I said you created a monster in that 13-year-old, right? Like if
this
you
guy's
had some
no,
like 50-year-old knowledge at 13.
well, this is 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Different guy.
Yeah.
And this 13-year-old is already getting that what the 15-year-old, he's getting that at 13, but you know why it actually where the deficit was? We didn't include the disciplines in those videos. We just included the right. So that's what he was missing. And I put in the disciplines there, he might not have even needed me. Anyhow, have a wonderful, wonderful long weekend, everybody. At this time of recording, we're I think August 30th to 24, and we're about to go into our long weekend. Thank you, Ray, for being my wife of 32 years. We had our anniversary. For some reason, I was telling everybody 34, and I actually did the math and realized there's only 32.
You can see years old. One year he had us at 33, and now we're at 32. We're going back.
Yeah, so I decided to actually do the math, right? So
Figure it out, right?
we're 30 plus, right?
Well, I mean, that's a good problem to have. These are big numbers. You're posting big numbers. Congratulations to both of you.
It's yeah, and I don't know if
It blows up on Facebook, you know.
it's like everybody's like, yeah, we got so many Facebook replies. It's just,
I had to write a nice note because there were so many.
and I had to write some that was kind of like not too mushy, but it was real, right? I said I thanked Rayanne for allowing me to be me, right?
That's a big job.
It is because I'm a little eccentric, and if anybody knew me when I was younger, there's been a lot of different phases I've gone through, right? So, but Yugalam, good. Thank you for being here, Mark. I hope you guys all have a wonderful long weekend, and until next week, have a actually, yeah, no, we'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.